Beckoning Bookshelf. I'm your host, Jeffrey Ashcraft. Today, we are looking at Gallant by V.E. Schwab. This book was published in 2022 and became a #1 New York Times bestseller. It also has a few other accolades, which are just conveniently printed right here. It also has #1 Indie Next Pick, #1 Indie Bound bestseller, USA Today bestseller, has a Goodreads, a 2022 Goodreads Choice Award for Young Adult Fantasy. So, popular book. I found this book from an independent bookstore that I was visiting with my in-laws. So we were out visiting in-laws, and they knew of a bookstore that I'd never been to, and they were nice enough to take me there. And I have a rule when it comes to attending a bookstore for the first time. If I go to a store that I've never been to, I gotta find something new, something unfamiliar to me, something that I know nothing about, because it's always a fun adventure. You never know what you're gonna find, particularly with independent bookstores. Well, in this store, Gallant stood out to me. I mean, look at the cool font, cool colors. The cover looks awesome. Also, the art inside, that's just great. So this book stood out to me, so I figured this would be the book I get. This would be my unknown find. That's kind of what I call it, I guess. I coined that literally just now. Anyways, what is this book about? Well, this book follows Olivia Prior, who is a young woman who is orphaned and living in a boarding school for young girls. She's also mute, by the way. She's not deaf, just mute. Well, she knows nothing about her family, about her parents, about who she is, where she comes from. But she does have her mother's journal, which she uses to try to find some answers, to who her mother was, to who she is. Well, one day, she receives a letter inviting her to what the letter claims to be her family home, Gallant, which in her mother's journal, it says to stay away from Gallant. Well, Olivia's not going to be told what to do. She wants answers, and it's got to be way better than the boarding school. So she decides to go to Gallant to try to find some answers. But she quickly learns that Gallant has a whole lot of mysteries, some of which are very dangerous. So that's what the book is about. That's a decent synopsis for you. Before I talk about what I think of the book, I want to talk a little bit more about how Schwab described the book. So Schwab described this book as The Secret Garden meets Crimson Peak. The Secret Garden being the book by Francis Hodgson Burnett, and Crimson Peak being the film by Guillermo del Toro. And I can see it. I see the connections there. I mean, this is kind of like The Secret Garden, but with supernatural aspects and also a lot more gothic. I see the similarities there. Schwab also described this book as literary gothic, so there you go. But if I'm going to compare it to other books, I would also have to say it also is very comparable to Coraline by Neil Gaiman, at least with the story. I mean, think of this. So, both stories are about unique young women who wind up moving into some old house that has a garden and is practically in the middle of nowhere, that is connected to a secret world where a creepy, evil being dwells that wants to capture them. I mean, it's practically both books to like the foundation of the story, like a real simple synopsis. So, there you go. I think it's also very comparable to Coraline. This book also has some illustrations, some cool illustrations. I'll just show them here. And these illustrations were done by Manuel Schumbaratz, something like that. I hope I'm pronouncing that right, at least close. And I think the illustrations are well done. I think they fit the atmosphere of the book very, very well. So, what did I think of the book? Well, I think it's well written. I like the characters, particularly how Olivia is mute, and that gives her very unique hurdles to overcome, but also some unique talents and some unique gifts that she can also utilize. So I thought that was very interesting. The other characters are interesting enough. The plot and mystery are engaging. The atmosphere Schwab succeeds in creating an atmosphere with the book. I think that was very well done. I also like how there are unknowns with the story. The book doesn't explain everything, and I love a good unknown that doesn't feel like you're being cheated. And so let me put it this way. The book doesn't feel unfinished. It just feels that there's more to the story, that the story and the world are more expansive and we just don't have all the answers yet. And I really like that. I really like that when it's well utilized. And I think it's well utilized here. We get the key aspect, the key mysteries are solved, but there's a lot of other mysteries that we just don't know the answer to. So that allows for a lot of imagination and speculation and, I don't know, experimentation. I just wanted to add another word that sounded like that. Anyways, so, but when it comes to the atmosphere of the book, like I said, Schwab succeeds in creating a very specific atmosphere for this book, and I think she did very well. But it's not exactly the atmosphere for me. So that's not to say it's badly written or anything like that. It's just not my type of atmosphere. Particularly, I think the book for me is too wordy. It's not word salad, so it's not like there's a bunch of unnecessary words that are just there without purpose, without saying anything, just a lot of emptiness. I think that Schwab really did meticulously pick the words she used to create an appropriate atmosphere, to create the atmosphere she was going for. So I think the words have a purpose here. It's just not my piece of pie. I just think it was too wordy for me. If I were to compare it to an actual environment, I would say reading this book is kind of like a leisurely tea time in a dark Gothic mansion by a window in which it's sunny outside. You know, that's kind of the feel, the vibe I get from this book. And that's just not my type of vibe. It just isn't. It is well written. I think it deserves the bestseller status that it has, but it's just not my piece of pie. If you've read the book, do you think my example is accurate? Do you think that's a good way to describe the atmosphere of the book? And if not, how would you describe it? Because maybe you get a better description than me. That's just the vibe I got from it. So, one other thing I want to talk about with the book is that it does use a trope that I really don't like. But it does it in a way that I found less annoying. So one of the storytelling tropes that is often used to expand a mystery, to lengthen out the mystery, is people who have the answers just refuse to say anything. And I loathe this trope most of the time because it's very overused and it's often poorly used. It's so frustrating when you have a character who has answers and they refuse to tell anyone those answers, and a bunch of chaos and drama and tension ensues. That's just all wildly unnecessary. And this is particularly the case, and this happens in this book, where the characters just refuse to give Olivia answers. They have the answers, but they force her to go and investigate them herself. Try to figure it out herself. And she eventually does stumble onto something, and guess what? They get mad at her. Well, if you would have just told her what's going on, then she wouldn't have stumbled on it. You know, so I don't like that trope. But like I said, here, it didn't bother me as much. And I think there's two reasons why. First is the reason that the characters don't explain everything to Olivia. I think they have good reasons. Well, okay, not good reasons. Understandable reasons. I'll say that. So that didn't bother me near as much. Secondly, I think Olivia has a much more difficult time getting answers out of people because she can't just walk up and just say, hey, what's going on? I want to know what the answers are. Come on, and ask them questions. She's mute, so she has to either do sign language or write it down. Well, if a person doesn't want to answer a question, they just have to look away, and now suddenly Olivia can't say anything, which infuriates Olivia, which is very understandable. So I think those two reasons make the trope less infuriating in this case. So I think Schwab did a good job not misusing that secret-keeping trope to extend the mystery. So yeah, I thought it was an entertaining book. I enjoyed it for the most part. Again, I am not the target audience for the atmosphere in this book, but I think it was very well written and the atmosphere was very well established. If you're a fan of literary Gothic novels with some mystery and some supernatural elements, you might be a really big fan of this book. You might really enjoy it. So, have you read Gallant? And if you have, what do you think? And again, like, if my atmospheric example, if you think it was accurate, great. If you think I kind of missed the mark, let me know. I would love to see what you think of it. Have you read anything else by V.E. Schwab? And what do you think of those books? Anyways, that's all I have for you today. Thank you for being here. Thank you always for being here. You are amazing. Now go find yourself a good book.